Something just happened that should have made headlines everywhere. A sitting U.S. president picked up the phone, called the top reporters in the country, and announced a historic deal. A full agreement with Iran, open waterways, nuclear material being scooped up by American excavators, Iran funding no more proxies, free passage through one of the most strategically critical straits on the planet. 7 claims, in 1 hour, and every single one of them was false. The most jaw-dropping part? The ships already knew it before the journalists did. Here's the number you need to keep in your head for this entire video. 7. 7 claims, 1 hour, 0 verified. That is not a typo. Iran's own parliament leader counted them, publicly, on the record. He said, "The President of the United States made 7 claims in 1 hour, all 7 of which were false. 7 for 7. A perfect score, just not the kind you want." And while Trump was on the phone dictating headlines to CBS and Reuters and Axios like a man calling in his lunch order, shipping captains were looking at the actual data coming out of the Strait of Hormuz and turning their ships around. Not one, not a few, all of them. Think about what that means. The market spiked on Trump's announcement. Traders were celebrating, and simultaneously, every commercial vessel trying to enter the strait was doing a U-turn in real time. The ships knew the deal was fake before the stock market did. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you are going to understand exactly how a non-existent deal got reported as a diplomatic breakthrough by the mainstream media, why the shipping data is the only source you should ever trust in a situation like this, and what Iran actually said versus what Trump says Iran said. These are 2 very different things. Welcome to Jeremy News. Let's get into it. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is. 20% of the world's oil supply passes through it. Every year, roughly 600 billion worth of energy moves through that narrow corridor between Iran and Oman. It is not a nice-to-have shipping lane. It is a jugular vein for the global economy. If Iran controls who gets through, and they do, then Iran holds leverage that no amount of presidential phone calls can tweet away. Now, here's the background you need. There was already a framework on the table. Iran had put forward what they called a 10-point plan, on April 8th. That plan included, and read this carefully, coordinated commercial vessel traffic. Not free passage, not American control. Coordinated, meaning you submit your route, Iran approves it, Iran's Revolutionary Guard decides if you go through or you don't. That was the deal before Trump's announcement. That was the deal after Trump's announcement. Nothing changed. Not one word of Iran's position shifted, but Donald Trump called up reporters, including, and I say this with maximum sarcasm, his favorite stenographer at Axios, and told them Iran had agreed to everything. American excavators going into Iran, U.S. control of the strait, no more Hezbollah funding. The uranium is basically gift-wrapped and ready for pickup. And here is the part that should make you want to throw your phone across the room. They published it verbatim. No verification, no pushback. No, we reached out to Iran for comment. Just published it, as if Trump had just described the weather. The answer to what is actually happening did not come from CBS. It did not come from Reuters. It came from the shipping data. And this is the part that is almost too perfect. While the markets were roaring on Trump's announcement, while journalists were filing their historic deal pieces, you could pull up live maritime tracking and watch ship after ship enter the strait, slow down, and reverse course. A mass U-turn. Dozens of vessels simultaneously deciding that no, actually, the strait was not as fully open as the President of the United States had just announced on 4 major news networks. The ships had better intelligence than CNN. Then came Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson. Then came Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister. Then came Iran's parliament leader, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, and he did not mince words. He put out a public post that essentially said, "This man is lying about everything, and we are not embarrassed to say so explicitly." His exact words, "Whether the strait is open or closed and the regulations governing it will be determined by the field, not by social media." Not by social media? That's a direct message to one very specific social media user with nuclear codes and a Mar-a-Lago membership. Let's go through what Iran actually said, because words have meaning, even when the person on the other end of the phone doesn't seem to think so. Iran's position, stated clearly through official channels. 1. Ship movement through the Strait of Hormuz will follow routes set by Iran and be coordinated with Iranian authorities. The word coordinated means Iran approves it. It does not mean ships drive through freely like a highway. 2. Commercial vessels, not military. A U.S. naval blockade will be, and I'm quoting here, considered a violation of the ceasefire and would trigger a response. So American warships are not exactly welcome. 3. Enriched uranium will not be transferred anywhere under any circumstance. No excavators, no pickup, not happening. Iran made this crystal clear. 4. There were no direct talks between U.S. and Iranian officials. The meetings that happened were mediated by Pakistan. The talks in Islamabad were between Iran's parliamentary speaker and the U.S. vice president, with Pakistan in the middle. Any claims of direct U.S.-Iran talks are, per Iran's official statement, false. 5. Iran told mediators, and this came from the Wall Street Journal, not exactly a pro-Iran publication, that it will continue to limit the number of ships allowed to cross the strait and will charge tolls for the remaining ceasefire period. Tolls. They're charging tolls. This is not fully open. This is a checkpoint with a fee. It's less a diplomatic breakthrough and more a toll booth that happens to be operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now compare that to what Trump told CBS. Iran's agreed to everything. They're going to work with the United States to remove its buried stockpile of highly enriched uranium. No troops, no troops. We're going to go down. We're going to take it. We're going to go in there with excavators. Excavators. He said excavators. Iran's response to the excavator claim was essentially, absolutely not, never, stop talking. Here's why this is not just embarrassing, it's actually dangerous. When a U.S. president announces that the strait is fully open and ships start acting on that information, and then those ships reach the strait and find out it is very much not fully open, you now have a potential confrontation between commercial vessels and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Not because of aggression, because of miscommunication engineered by a presidential phone call. Think about the cascade. A ship captain hears the President of the United States say the strait is open. He routes his vessel through. He encounters an Iranian patrol that has received no such memo, because the memo doesn't exist. What happens next is not a negotiation. It's an incident. And incidents in the Strait of Hormuz have a way of escalating into things that affect every person on the planet who uses gasoline, plastics, or electricity. And it gets more absurd. The same day all of this is happening, the U.S. Treasury quietly dropped a Friday night notice, the diplomatic equivalent of burying something in a parking garage, lifting sanctions on Russian oil for another month. This comes 48 hours after Treasury Secretary Bessent stood at a podium and told the press, definitively, we will not be renewing the general license on Russian oil. He said it, on camera, with his whole chest. 2 days later, renewed. So, in one 24-hour news cycle, we have Trump announcing a deal that doesn't exist, and Bessent reversing a sanction he said he wouldn't reverse. The pattern here is not subtle. And then, and I genuinely could not make this up, Trump posted that Israeli strikes on Lebanon are prohibited. Israel asked the White House what that meant. The White House clarified, Israel can still strike Lebanon in self-defense. Israel's definition of self-defense, as we have watched for months, includes bombing civilian homes, which continued, minutes after the clarification. The ceasefire that wasn't, the deal that wasn't, the sanction reversal that wasn't supposed to happen. It's a lot of wasn'ts for one news cycle. Let me be fair here because I think fairness is what separates actual analysis from just yelling into a microphone. Is it possible that back-channel negotiations are happening that we don't have full visibility into? Yes. Diplomacy is rarely fully transparent, and sometimes public statements from both sides are designed for domestic audiences rather than reflecting the actual state of talks. Is it possible Trump is overstating progress while Iran is understating it, and the truth is somewhere in the middle? In theory, yes. But here's what we can actually verify. The shipping data is real. Ships turned around. You can track this yourself. The AIS maritime data is publicly available. Iran's official statements are on the record, signed by named officials, specific and consistent with their April 8th framework. The gap between what Trump announced and what Iran's government says is not a matter of interpretation. It's a gap between excavators are going in to collect uranium and enriched uranium will not be transferred anywhere under any circumstance. Those two positions cannot both be true, and one of them is supported by the ships that turned around. Iran wanted to be seen as having surrendered. Instead, they're charging tolls and setting routes and banning U.S. military vessels from their waters, and calling the U.S. president a liar on the international stage. Trump wanted to announce a triumph. Instead, he accidentally created a real danger. Ships acting on false information in one of the world's most volatile waterways. And the press corps, the people whose literal job is to not publish unverified claims as fact, published the unverified claims as fact. Again. Because someone called them on the phone. Here is where things stand right now. The Strait of Hormuz is operating under Iran's pre-existing 10-point framework. Nothing has changed. No American excavators are entering Iran. Iran has explicitly prohibited this. No direct U.S.-Iran negotiations have taken place. Talks are Pakistan-mediated. Russian oil sanctions were lifted hours after being declared non-renewable. Israel continues striking Lebanon under the self-defense exception that essentially swallows the rule. The question now is simple. At what point does reporting what a president says, without verifying what is actually happening, stop being journalism and start being something else entirely? The ships knew the answer before the markets did. Maybe the press corps should start looking at shipping data. Jeremy News will keep watching what's actually on the water, not what's on the phone call. If this gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening in the Strait, share this with someone still reading the headline version of this story. They deserve better. Subscribe so you don't miss our next breakdown, and drop your answer in the comments. Do you think the mainstream media published Trump's claims out of laziness or something else entirely? We'll see you in the next one.